Shalom, Geneva. One more time. Shalom, Geneva. There we go. I'm Saskia Pantel from the World Zionist Organization, and it's my great honor to welcome all of you here today. I know that some of you have traveled very far, so far as 13 hours by bus, just to come here to this rally today. Others are supporting us by tuning in from all around the world, so there's a lot of support for this cause today. Now, together we are always stronger, and we're standing here today supporting human rights, and we're supporting Israel. We're using the hashtag, for those of you on social media, no more double standards. So, it is my great honor to welcome our keynote speaker, MK Yair Lapid, who is the founder, the chairperson of Yesh Atid. Please welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to start by thanking those that helped put this together and all of you that came. I especially want to thank our friends, the Israel Allies Foundation, Stand With Us, the World Zionist Organization, the European Union of Jewish Students, and of course, the local pro-Israel community here in Geneva. We stand here, Jews and non-Jews, from Israel and from all across Europe, to protest the fact that here, in that building, in the United Nations Human Rights Council, instead of doing what they're supposed to do, they are encouraging murder, encouraging terror, encouraging injustice. And we are not willing to remain silent anymore. That is not a council for human rights. That has become a council for terrorist rights. In the past decade, the Council has passed 55 resolutions regarding human rights violations in the entire world, in the entire globe, with all its endless conflicts. In the same decade, in the same 10 years, the Council has passed 62 resolutions against Israel. 7 more resolutions about Israel than the entire rest of the world. In this decade, Israel was constantly under attack from terrorists who set out to kill civilians, women, children, the elderly. We face so many things. Our enemy mock the core concept of what it is to be human, while we are trying to protect a democratic state while keeping to the highest standards of international law. We face fundamentalist Islamic terror organizations who want to murder Jews just because they are Jews. We face Iran and its terror subcontractors that has declared again and again that its goal is the total destruction of Israel. And we face 62 resolutions by an organization which cheats the world and calls itself a Human Rights Council. 400,000 murdered in Syria, tens of thousands murdered in Iraq, in Libya, in Afghanistan. And the Council condemns Israel. Women are raped in Rwanda, Sudan, all across the Middle East. And the Council condemns Israel. People are beheaded, and women are forced into slavery in Iraq. And the Council condemns Israel. 3 million people are displaced in Syria. The Council condemns Israel. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is only ranked 49th in the number of casualties in conflicts around the world. But there is only one country, only one, which the rules of Human Rights Council dictate has a special agenda item. Let me introduce you to agenda item number 7, which states that every time the Council is in session, it has to discuss, even if nothing happened, even if no evidence has been presented, it has to discuss the human rights situation in Israel. Why? Because they no longer even try to conceal their support for the terrorism of Hamas, of Hezbollah, and the knife attackers in our streets. Because they no longer even try to pretend that they're objective. Because they no longer even try to hide the fact that they are anti-Israel, anti-Jews, and anti-justice. Today, here in Geneva, the Council has 6 more anti-Israeli discussions on the agenda. 6 more. Each one more ridiculous than the other, more hostile than the next, and with less foundation in fact than the other. Regarding our enemies, the biggest perpetrators of human rights violations on this planet, as usual, there will be no resolution, no condemnation, not a single word. In the past 6 months, terrorists have stalked the streets of Israel, shooting our children, stabbing women and the elderly, carrying out car ramming attacks. Rabbi Eitam and his wife Naama Henkin were not soldiers. They were a couple driving home with their 4 young children. The parents were killed, shot to death, the children injured. Daphna Meir, a mother of 6, was killed while she stood in the doorway of her house, protected the young daughter so she wouldn't be murdered as well. Alon Bakal was shot to death in Tel Aviv. He was 26 years old, a volunteer in a humanitarian organization. He was what they call here a human rights activist. And how does the United Nations Human Rights Council respond to this murder? A human rights activist was murdered. They support the murderer. The treatment of Israel by the Council is far beyond bias. It is obsessive. It's insanity. I am the son of a Holocaust survivor. Let me tell you something about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semites never admit that they are anti-Semitic. They always give it a different name. They say it's something else. So we learned in the past 2,000 years that it doesn't matter what they say, it only matters what they do. And what they're doing here today in the United Nations Human Rights Council is pure, old school anti-Semitism. There is only one democratic country in the Middle East. There is only one country in the Middle East in which the rights of minorities are protected, in which women's rights are protected, gay rights, the right of every person to free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of movement. And that country, of course, is Israel. There is only one country in the Middle East whose military, the IDF, insists on international law, on human rights, and on moral standards, which no army in the world comes close to. And this country, of course, is Israel. And that's the country the United Nations Human Rights Council constantly attacks. I call on from here the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. This organization is under your command. It's yours. Why do you allow an organization which attacks Jews for being Jews to work under your auspices? It's time for you to take a moral stand. I call upon the members of the United States Congress. The United States is the largest funder of the United Nations. Why do you allow American money to be used by an organization which continuously provides encouragement for fundamentalist Islamic terror? Today, I have written to Israel's friends in Congress and asked them to make the funding for the United Nations dependent on ending the discrimination against Israel and the United Nations Human Rights Council. I call on the European Union and all democratic countries. Don't let this moral distortion continue. You can, it is your duty to demand accountability from this organization. Article 7 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights decrees the following: all are equal before law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. If the nations of the world view that declaration and their commitments with sincerity, they must act accordingly. It's time to put an end to the blatant discrimination of the United Nations Human Rights Council against Israel. And we are here together because nor the state of Israel nor its friends around us are no longer willing to be silent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is the Vice Chair of the World Zionist Organization. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. David Breakstone.
Thank you, Mr. Lapid, for those sobering remarks. It is so important that these facts and figures be shared with all of us, for though we gather here today, and I also want to thank all of you for coming from so far and wide, we gather here today to declare loudly and unambiguously that we unequivocally support the promotion of human rights and the struggle for equality of all peoples and of all people. But we have also come together to question if the members of the United Nations Human Rights Council can make the same declaration in good faith and in good conscience. As Mr. Lapid has so clearly demonstrated, their deliberations and their actions suggest otherwise. You have now heard about the infamous item number 7, but allow me to add that it is not only an attack on Israel, it is also a frontal assault on Zionism, the quintessential movement of national liberation, a movement on which other oppressed peoples have modeled their own struggles for self-determination, among them the Armenians and the Kurds, who today, by the way, are celebrating their new year, marking their ancient deliverance from a tyrant, not unlike the Jewish holiday of Purim, also falling this week, which also is a celebration of deliverance from tyranny. May this indeed be a year in which all peoples will have their human rights honored. May it be one in which the Council addresses genuine abuses of human rights everywhere, abandoning its distorted and obsessive preoccupation with Israel. Let me be clear. We have no objection to scrutinizing the Israeli government's human rights record regarding all those living under its jurisdiction. We do have an objection, however, to the United Nations singling out one nation for investigation. Furthermore, we object strenuously to the official directive guiding that investigation, unabashedly prejudicial in its mandate, and I quote, to investigate Israel's violations of the principles of international law, humanitarian law, and the Geneva Convention. The presumed guilt on the part of Israel evident in the wording of these instructions and the explicit exclusion of the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and the Islamic Jihad from any inspection whatsoever not only is grossly unfair, it also means that a major cause of the real suffering of the Palestinian people will go unaddressed. The Palestinian leadership that incites violence, oppresses its own people, uses international funds to procure weapons and build attack tunnels, instead of providing social services and building the hospitals and the schools for which that money was given, is exonerated from violating the human rights of its own people without even so much as a cursory review of its policies. The results, as you have heard, the Human Rights Council has passed more resolutions against Israel than against all of the 192 other member states of the United Nations combined, and those being presented today cover an astonishing 28 pages of venomous diatribe laden with lies and motivated by malice. Read them. They're available on the websites. You will shudder in disbelief. Our demonstration today will not block their passage, but it will help draw the world's attention to the blatant hypocrisy of those who have the audacity to claim they are concerned with advancing a cause we all believe in, while ignominiously ignoring the flagrant abuses of human rights throughout the Arab world and in despotic nations everywhere. Now is the moment to take action, because the Human Rights Council is about to appoint a special rapporteur charged with overseeing the investigation required by scandalous item number 7, and those being recommended for this post make a mockery of the entire proceedings. The top 2 candidates each have a long history of virulent anti-Israel bias, calling for its elimination as a Jewish state, advocating BDS, and shamelessly accusing it of being an apartheid regime guilty of conducting ethnic cleansing and criminal state practices. Government officials in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada have already expressed their outrage over these nominations. We need your country's leaders to do the same. The postcards which we have distributed throughout the crowd today contain a link for taking action. That's what your smartphones are for. Together, we must demand that the Human Rights Council be held accountable and prodded into fulfilling the lofty purpose for which it was established. Israel will be well served. The legitimate needs of the Palestinian people will be addressed, and citizens of the world everywhere whose human rights are being trampled will be given a measure of hope. Together, we call on true defenders of human rights everywhere to demand that the United Nations Human Rights Council remove item number 7 from its agenda. Together, we proclaim enough, and together we proclaim no. No to singling out Israel for condemnation. No to absolving the Palestinian leadership of responsibility for the suffering of its people. No to the appointment of prejudicial investigators. And together, we also proclaim yes. Yes to equality. Yes to holding governments accountable for safeguarding the human rights of those under their jurisdiction. And yes to impartiality, fairness, and upholding the highest moral standards in the proceedings of the United Nations so-called Human Rights Council. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And about this petition, it's something we're launching today. It's a petition starting today, calling on action for the removal of item 7, which is the key essence showing as a proof of how biased the United Nations Human Rights Council is. The link is in the live stream as well as the postcards distributed, and we will be continuing this for a very long time. Now, I'm delighted to present our next speaker. She is here speaking on behalf of Stand With Us. She is a terrorist attack survivor. Please give a warm welcome to Kay Wilson.
Shalom. Thanks for turning up, everybody. I'm here today, as I've been introduced, on behalf of Stand With Us, and also to speak for those no longer here, to speak for themselves, Israel's victims of Palestinian terrorism. 5 years ago, I was standing in a Jerusalem forest with my Christian American friend, Christine Lucan, gagged, bound, barefoot, being held hostage by 2 Palestinians who had their machetes at our throats. Finally, after half an hour, one of them takes my Israeli ID card and removes my Star of David and pushes me to my knees. The forest rings out with the Islamic creed of faith. My Christian friend screams, "Jesus, help me." And through the vomit behind my gag, I gurgle, "Shema Israel." He stabs me in the back so hard I fall to the ground, and now he leans on me, and each time he plunges his machete into me, I can hear my bones crunch. And it's a serrated blade that gets stuck in bone, so as he tugs it out, my blood spurts and I hear my flesh rip. And the only chance I have is to play dead, so I try to maintain the pain and just focus 2 meters ahead, and I watch the most unforgettable and somehow sacred sight of an innocent human being hacked to death before my eyes. They leave only to return moments later, and one rolls me over on my back, and now I'm looking up at that canopy of pines, and I see a sunset obscured by the silhouette of a knife, and I watch him plunge it into my chest, and it missed my heart by 4 millimeters. I've one last commission left in life, and that is to die nearer to where I parked the car so the police can find my body. And I manage to stand, and as I walk, I listen to the symphony of life. Birds singing, crickets chirping, bees buzzing, flies humming, twigs snapping under my feet. And I hear the call of death, bubbling and gurgling as my lungs fill with blood, and I am ever aware that the next step may be my last. Somehow I make it back to the car. I had 6 ribs that had snapped and were poking out of my back, 30 compound fractures in my rib cage, bones of which had splintered off into my lungs. I had a crushed sternum, a dislocated shoulder, a broken shoulder blade, 13 machete wounds in my lungs and diaphragm, and in that state, gag-bound, barefoot, I walked uphill for over a mile. 9 months later, I faced my would-be murderers in court. There was no forensic doubt I'd stabbed one with my penknife. They also confessed to murdering another Israeli woman, Netta Blat-Sorek, a few months previously. And as I listened to them snigger and watched them smirk, I asked myself, how can 2 men who were once little boys grow up and hold a machete in one hand, a Marlboro in the other, and hack at innocent women without blinking an eye? And the answer is incitement and incentive. The Palestinian Authority teaches its children that Jews are unworthy of life, and this incitement is in their media, their summer camps, and even their crossword puzzles. And the incentive is American and European taxpayers' money given to the Palestinian Authority, who rewards incarcerated, cold-blooded murderers with monthly execution stipends. Shame on the United Nations for not holding the Palestinian Authority accountable, and shame on the United Nations for pathologically demonizing Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, and one that saw that it was an Israeli Arab Muslim surgeon who saved my life. rabbis butchered in prayer, babies sleeping and slaughtered in their cots, schoolboys bludgeoned beyond recognition, teenagers kidnapped and murdered, and an American Christian woman hacked to death because they thought she was Jewish. These heinous crimes are justified, excused, and therefore enabled by the likes of the United Nations, who whitewashes terrorism as people's frustrations. Well, I am frustrated. And sometimes I am desperate because I have lost my friend, my health, an expectancy of a long life. I've lost my home, my vocation, the dignity to provide for myself. I've lost my anonymity, my independence, weight, sleep, routine, the mundane, even the ability to answer how I am. And because I have been a random and senseless target of terror, I've lost the edge of my humanity. And given the fact that I have been privy to hearing the last prayer of a woman as she is being murdered, I have lost my innocence. Yes, I am frustrated, but I have not taken out my frustrations on slaughtering innocent people. On the contrary, at the risk of my own life, I've hidden Muhammad Zouabi, an Israeli Arab Muslim teenager, in my own house from Muslims who wanted to murder him. I've traveled to Egypt to meet with a Muslim peace activist, and I've been to Bethlehem, which is under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority. And there, in secret, I met with an Arab Christian pastor whose church has been bombed 14 times by Palestinian Islamists. But like me, this noble gentleman knows that to be held in perpetual victimhood is not noble, kind, moral, or true. I am thankful to belong to a people who choose life over death, a people who have God, a Torah, a language and a land, and whose very ancient indigenous rights are inscribed unequivocally on the annals of history and etched in archaeology throughout the land. I am thankful to belong to a people who choose light over dark, and it is Israel that nudges me to look to that light, a sunset, and not just see the machete that obscures it. And it is Israel that compels me to listen to the birds and not just hear the screams of my friend. And it is Israel who helps me inhale those fragrant pines and not just smell the vomit behind my gag. So I stand here today with my back to the United Nations, and on behalf of the thousands of Israeli survivors of Palestinian terrorism, I declare, Modani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam shechsat bi nishmati b'chemla, rabba emunatecha. I give thanks to you, O living and eternal King, that in your compassion you've restored my very breath. Great is your faithfulness. Am Yisrael chai!
Wow, thank you. Our next speaker is also a speaker of Stand With Us. May I introduce Gilad Kabilo, former IDF soldier.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out here to make your voices heard. In Israel, it is sometimes easy to forget and to feel that we're alone in the world. But when I come out here today, I'm astounded by the love and support that we're getting. And I'm reminded that all it takes for evil to triumph is that good people do nothing. So thank you for being good people who are doing something. I'm grateful to be here on behalf of Stand With Us to represent the brave men and women of the IDF. I myself served in the paratroopers and intelligence corps. I was active in almost every front that Israel fights on, and most recently took part in Operation Protective Edge. Today, like almost every other Israeli, and due to the dangerous neighborhood in which I live, I serve in the reserves, ready to be called back to service at a moment's notice. In June of 2014, just shortly after returning from my honeymoon, I received that call. Gilad Shaer, Naftali Frenkel, and Eyal Ifrach, 3 teenagers on their way home, had been kidnapped and murdered by Hamas terrorists. Hamas then began shooting thousands of rockets over the border towards communities in Israel. It was the beginning of what would soon be known as Operation Protective Edge. Let me tell you that no soldier wants war. No soldier who has felt the fear of war and had to leave his family behind wants to receive that call. But as rockets were flying in the skies of my hometown, I knew, as many others did, that we had no choice but to fight once more. I served as an intelligence officer on the border near Khan Yunis in Gaza. Our mission was to locate and collapse entrances to terror tunnels through which Hamas intended to kidnap Israeli civilians. We had just located one such tunnel within a building that housed an UNRWA clinic. Think about that. A terror tunnel inside a UN clinic. Could we have bombed this building from the air? Could we have shelled it with long-range artillery at no danger to ourselves? It was a target. It was a terror tunnel inside a United Nations clinic. But we knew that some people might still be inside, since we had seen before how Hamas forces Palestinians to stay behind and guard tunnel entrances with their bodies. There was also the chance, however small after our leaflets and warning phone calls, that some had come to the clinic looking for shelter. In Israel's army, we are serious about protecting civilian life, even when the terrorists we are fighting deliberately endanger their own civilians. And so it was decided that our forces would enter the house and search it to make sure that we were attacking the tunnel and not civilians. The unit's most veteran team, just a few months before the end of their service, entered the house, and 12 barrels, equaling 1 ton of explosives, collapsed the clinic on top of them. Sergeants Matan Gottlieb, Omer Chai, and Gael Granati were killed. Why do we fight this way? Why do we endanger our own soldiers and forfeit one of the most basic principles of war, the element of surprise, in order to protect civilians? To the soldiers of the IDF, the answer is simple. Toar HaNeshek, the purity of arms. It is one of the foremost guiding principles of our moral code. This code. Ooh, that's not the code. Ruach Tzahal, the spirit of the IDF. It is our charter that is handed to every man and woman on the first day of their service to be carried with them at all times and guide them in their duty. Those who serve the United Nations have a charter of their own. And that charter reads, "We, the people of the United Nations, determined to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights." And so we ask, how is this faith demonstrated when the only army in the Middle East that holds human rights sacred is the one put on trial again and again? How are human rights upheld when those who use human shields and put terror tunnels in clinics, like Hamas, are given a free pass time and time again? These crimes cannot continue to go ignored. Those in need of the protection of this council cannot see it led astray, distracted of its mission by those who place hatred above all else, by those who boycott peace, divest from dialogue, and sanction coexistence, those who cynically exploit this council to mask their own crimes, and who sacrifice the future of their own people as fuel for their hatred of Israel. They cannot go unchallenged, and we are grateful to those who stand up to them. The Human Rights Council must be a beacon of hope for the defenseless. We are here today to implore the men and women who serve it. Do not let that light go out. Do not let this mission be corrupted. Do not be led by hatred, but seek the truth. Thank you, and shalom.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Director for International Relations at the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Shimon Samuels.
Friends, Jewish and Gentile supporters of Israel. Many of the Christians here have worked with us in the past and are members, and I'm proud to see them with us. I spent much of the year 2000 here in Geneva at what was then called the United Nations Human Rights Committee. Why? Because I had been elected as the only Jew to the International Steering Committee of the World Conference Against Racism, later to be known as the Durban Conference, which was the brainchild of this house behind us. We met in prepcoms, preparatory committees in various places, and I remember that at one of those, a session on drafting regarding a document on Holocaust denial, the PLO representative crept up behind me and whispered in my ear, "If you give us Palestine, we'll give you the Holocaust." And there was a Dutch photographer who immortalized the outrage and expression on my face. But on arrival in Durban, I was physically ejected from the steering committee, where I was called the World Jew, which was a debasement of the fact that I had been elected the chairman of the Durban Jewish Caucus. Durban ended on the 8th of September, 72 hours before 9/11. On the 6th of December, somehow I got an invitation to the last meeting of that steering committee here in this building. And when I arrived, they said, "You're not welcome," but the High Commissioner was sitting there, so they couldn't remove me. On every seat, there was a blue piece of paper. And that blue piece of paper was remarkable because what it was an 8-point post-Durban plan modeled on the Sullivan program against apartheid South Africa. First point, an educational inculcation program against apartheid Israel. Second, a legal campaign, then through the World Court, beginning now at the International Criminal Tribunal. Third, cancellation of the Jewish right of return. And fourth, its replacement by a right of return, al-awda in Arabic, for 1967 and 1948 refugees. And at 5 o'clock this afternoon, there's a meeting of them on that subject here behind me. 5, the re-establishment, because it wasn't new, it already existed in Damascus, of the economic boycott. And 6, a series of cultural, scientific, sports, and academic embargoes that now we know as BDS. 7, the rupture of diplomatic relations, turning Israel into a pariah state. And the 8th was penalties for states and NGOs who refused to comply. And attached with it was an appendix. And it was a list of proposed financial sponsors. Many of them you would know. Paternity of the document was roundly denied during the meeting. But this has been the exponentially expanding roadmap of our enemies for the past 15 years. It is nothing new. Only points 7 and 8, the rupture of diplomatic relations and the penalties for refusal, needed still to be invoked. And on the 1st of March, when this session opened, the Palestinian Foreign Minister, Riyad Maliki, he had the chutzpah, if you know the word, to demand from the international community to bar entry to all Israeli passport holders residing in the territories. And just as the European Union's labeling boycott of products from the territories is a step along the slippery path towards a full boycott, so the Minister of Palestine is proposing a nightmare redolent of the 1930s, a scenario where Israeli Jewish citizens, their passports are delegitimized as they're detained at borders, at airports, where they have to explain or prove that they live within a green line that is, to ignorant immigration officials, meaningless. The states are unlikely to adopt this, but this concept, the very concept, by the Council, which had no expression of indignation, sets a precedent for hostile NGOs. Out of Geneva shall fly the concept to Porto Alegre, Brazil, the annual extreme left NGO World Social Forum, where we are still the only Zionist Jewish organization to regularly attend, and then to its satellites of the European Social Forum, and then from there to be regurgitated across the UN system. As we approach Passover and beyond Purim, As we approach Passover, we recall that the Lord led us out of Egypt b'yad chazakah, with a clenched fist, u'b'zroa netuyah, an outstretched hand. Just like in today's parlance of diplomacy, it's called a carrot and a stick. To contain the anti-Semitism of the UN Human Wrongs Council, we need both to use the arsenal of fundamental rights to expand and strengthen our support, and to remind the world that point 8, still not invoked, the point 8 of the post-Durban program, penalties against the states and NGOs that refuse to comply, may be just too painful for them, because blackmail never ends with the first bite. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Micha Lakin Avnei, the son of Richard Lakin, who was murdered by terrorists in Jerusalem in October 2015. Please give a warm welcome.
Thank you. I just came from speaking inside the Human Rights Council, so this is a much easier crowd. You know, and I didn't expect this, but there was just one thought that was going through my mind, and I can't get it out of my mind. I'm going to share it with you. All of you here and everybody back around me in Israel, at home, we survived Auschwitz as a people. And in there, they're building the ideological train tracks to put us back in. That's what's going on. And that's what's been going on for years and years and years. And I hadn't fully understood that until I actually sat inside and listened to the tens of speakers who spoke before me, and I understood it. And I think people sit at home and they don't fully understand that and internalize that. It's nothing less than building the ideological train tracks to put us back in the ovens. That's what they're doing. I want to tell you a short personal story. I know you've heard a lot of speeches. I don't want to take up too much time. My father was a kind, gentle person. He was an educator, an elementary school principal. He educated thousands of children. He was a human rights, civil rights activist, worked for coexistence. He marched with Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States. He led school integration in the state where I grew up. We moved to Israel in the 1980s. He became very active in the coexistence movements. He and my mother set up a small school where Muslim, Christian, Jewish children learned English as a second language together, and they managed that school for many years. He wrote a book kind of summarizing his educational philosophy called Teaching is an Act of Love. So he was a good, kind person. He never hurt anybody in his life, and he just tried to get people to work together. In October of 2015, he was riding on bus number 78 in Armon HaNatziv in Jerusalem on his way back from a doctor's appointment. Two Palestinian terrorists got on the bus. They shot him in the head. They stabbed him in the face, in the head, in the chest, in the abdomen. They severed most of his vital organs. He was brought to Hadassah Hospital together with the terrorist who murdered him. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital. It was a horrific 2 weeks, unconscious the entire time before he died. I actually stood next to him and watched the terrorist regain consciousness. He was saved by the Israeli Magen David Adom and by Hadassah Hospital. And then similar to Kay's experience, there were Muslim and Christian and Jewish doctors and nurses involved in this whole experience, helping everybody. During that time, and this is what I want to get to, the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon came to visit us. And he came to Hadassah Hospital and he hugged us and he looked into my eyes standing next to my father. And after my father passed away, he sent a private condolence letter to my mother. But what he did not do, and what the Human Rights Council did not do, and what the UN did not do, is he did not condone that terrorist act. He didn't mention it publicly, ever. He didn't, later on, when Palestinian President Abbas met with the father of the man who, the animal, shall I say, who murdered my father, he called him a martyr who's going to go to heaven, and he praised his actions, sending a very clear message to the Palestinian people, and that's something that the UN was silent on. And I looked at the UN website here. They have a page. It's called UN Response to Terrorism, and they have a huge list of terror attacks all around the world, horrific things and condemnations. And there's not a single mention Certainly my father doesn't appear there, but there's not a single mention of Israel on that list of any of the Israelis who've been murdered over the past months. And so I came here today to the UN, to the Human Rights Council, to challenge the Secretary General and to ask a simple question. After I've told you about my father's background, can you just say the simple words that that action was wrong, that it was morally wrong, that it was illegal, and that you condone that specific action? Because if the person who stands at the head of this organization can't say those simple words, if he can't say those words in this specific case, then he can't preach peace, he can't lead any kind of change in the world, and he needs to resign. So I posed that challenge to him, and I'm waiting for an answer. Thank you. Well, he's actually not there. It's the formal method. He's waking up in New York now, so we'll see. We'll give him a few hours. He'll read the op-ed and Fox and with the same things, and hopefully we'll hear a response, and hopefully the press who are here will follow up on that. And so I just want to end with what I began with is I having not many things in life until you experience them, you don't understand the power and the problematics. Having sat in that room back there in the Human Rights Council, having listened to what goes on, it's nothing less than building the ideological train tracks to send us back to Auschwitz. And we as a people who are involved here in Geneva, in Israel, around the world, need to wake up to this and need to start to deal with it. And I just want to say kol hakavod to all of you who are out here, who you're bringing this to the world agenda, and you're speaking about this, to everybody who initiated this, to Yair Lapid, to David Breakstone, to the World Zionist Organization, to all of the other people who are involved in this, and really kol hakavod lechem.
Thank you very much. Now, our next speaker is the chair of EUJS, the European Union of Jewish Students. So I'd like to have a warm welcome for Benny Fisher.
Thank you very much. Fellow activists, חבר'ה, כבוד חבר הכנסת יאיר לפיד, thank you all for being here with us. Thank you for coming. Thank you for raising your voice. But before saying anything that I wrote, I want to salute and I want to thank the previous speakers for coming here, for sharing their testimonies with us, for having the courage to go through these memories again, those vivid memories, those horrible pictures, in order for the world to know, in order for the world to hear. Thank you very much. I salute you, I respect you, and I deeply admire you for the work and the courage that you have. Now, when I say that we stand here, this we means Jews and non-Jews. Because we stand here, the cause for what we stand here goes beyond our religious beliefs. When I say we, this we means left and right. Because our cause goes beyond our political affiliation. We means people from all over Europe. Because it goes beyond nationality. You should even stand here if you're not a friend of Israel. If you don't consider yourself a friend of Israel, you should stand here with us. Yes. Why? Because what we ask for is universal. We ask the world's highest body on human rights to do its job properly, to stick to its own ideals. Yes. We ask for the structural discrimination of the Middle East's only democracy to stop. We ask for no more double standards. Now, as we speak here, 20 of our student activists from all over Europe and Israel are in the council speaking up under the mentioned infamous item 7. They raise their voices for exactly this cause. And being their representative here today makes me incredibly proud. It is student activists who are often at the forefront of pressing issues like this. Most recently, repeatedly, through the infamous BDS movement, which poisons the atmosphere on campuses. It is them who have to respond on the spot. And I can assure you, they do an incredible job. And even here in Geneva, the ideas of this BDS movement are being reflected in some of the resolutions that are being discussed. They are being brought forward in the choice that will be made over the new special rapporteur. These are BDS activists. These are supporters of the boycott, divest, sanction movement. And they will be the special rapporteurs on that item, on that cause. Chevre, this council, it will not change tomorrow. And BDS will not vanish next week. But knowing that despite of all of this, you do not remain silent fills me with joy. Having experienced Geneva's bubble firsthand now, we will take our stories back to our communities. We will ensure that no matter how often they repeat their slurs, we will deliver another perspective. We will remain peaceful, for this is what defines us. We will keep our facts straight, for this is what justifies our stand. And by doing so, we will ultimately prove that no double standards can lead to peace. No more bias, no more double standards. Shalom V'racha.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to welcome our last speaker. He is Mr. Andres Patukai from the Israel Allies Foundation, who's helping a lot of you from Hungary, from Slovakia, and so on. Please give a warm welcome.
Shalom, ladies and gentlemen. We're living in a world of human rights abuses. And I represent the organization Israel Allies Foundation, which maintains a parliamentary network of parliamentarians who support the Jewish state. Most of our work happens inside the parliaments, but we're also here on the streets, in the communities. And people who come to the streets are full of passion. It is an enthusiastic thing to support Israel. It is the right thing to do, to be in the right place at the right time. And often people who take to the streets are accused of being extremists. But we feel that the real extremists are sitting in the building behind me. In the building in the United Nations and the Human Rights Council, which is supposed to advance human rights, supposed to promote human rights in the world. And this is why we believe in this place where there is, in Switzerland, a freedom of assembly and a freedom of conscience. In Europe, there is a freedom of assembly, a freedom of conscience, a freedom of expression. The Human Rights Council, created 10 years ago, has 47 members. And it is in the charter of the Human Rights Council, it says that members elected to the council shall uphold to the highest standards in the promotion and the protection of human rights. Promotion and protection. These nations should be an authority. They should be a reference point for human rights. And we should see instance after instance of the celebration of human rights in these 47 nations, where Christians and other religious minorities are protected, as in Israel, where journalists are not jailed or beheaded for criticizing the government, as it happens in Israel, where women's rights are protected, as it happens in Israel, where ethnic minorities can flourish, as it happens in Israel. These nations should send delegations to Israel. For example, delegations of teachers going to Israel from Saudi Arabia. Why not? Why don't we have delegations of human rights activists from Qatar going to Israel? Why don't we have delegations of mayors from Venezuela going to Israel? Why don't we have delegations of faith leaders from Nigeria going to Israel? Just to name a few countries from the Human Rights Council. So we celebrate the human rights situation in Israel. We have had enough of the singling out of Israel and of dedicating an entire agenda item specifically about Israel as if it was a troubled country. We have had enough of the singling out of Israel in this way and the double standards that are applied against Israel. We will promote human rights. We will protect human rights. I would like to thank our fellow organizers, the Swiss-Israel Friendship Association, Stand With Us, the World Zionist Organization, Simon Wiesenthal Center, and the European Union of Jewish Students. And a special thank you to Pastor Sándor Németh from Faith Church Hungary. A special thank you to Pastor Jaroslav Krzyż from the Milost communities in Slovakia. Special thank you to Pastor Thomas Koster from Glaubensgemeinde Munich. And a special thank you to Mr. Ivo Samson, who came to this demonstration from Slovakia representing the Ministry of Defense of Slovakia. We appreciate your support because we all stand together. Thank you.
With that conclusion, I would like to thank everyone who came here, everyone who's been supporting us and been involved in making this happen. This is not the last time we're doing this, and we will continue. I do encourage you to find the petition. It's on our link. It's on the postcard here. You can find it also being published from the World Zionist Organization's Facebook page and others. With that, I would like to welcome all of our speakers to come up here in the front, and together we will join in and we will sing the Hatikva once again. Thank you very much.